Thank you, Mr. Chair. We'd like to make some comments on the conclusions of the report overall. We haven't been seeking to take the floor on individual paragraph by paragraph because we didn't want to take precious time. But if you'll permit me to give an overall commentary on the conclusions, and I apologise if this ends up being a somewhat lengthy statement. I thought try to get it in before the end of the day. At the outset, Mr. Chair, we'd like to recognise that the Chair's report does reflect aspects of the common ground amongst all the proposals. We welcome the inclusion of both prohibitions and regulations, the recognition of the centrality of human control, the need to ensure human accountability and responsibility over the use of force, and also the detailed particularisation of what control looks like and how it should be practised. We ultimately believe that this structure has potential to provide the basis for a legally binding instrument on autonomous weapon systems. Before commencing on individual paragraphs, we would agree with those states in the room that have proposed another dedicated paragraph framing the problems and challenges posed by autonomous weapon systems. We believe that this should be in broad framing, recognising the ethical, legal, humanitarian, security and societal challenges. And we see that understanding and specifying the problem that we are addressing is really vital to then adequately responding to those problems. And so we would recommend an additional paragraph here. On paragraph 17, Chair, on prohibitions, we welcome the text here, including to include prohibitions on systems that are possessed, developed, deployed with a view towards use, and on systems that are used. Questions have been raised today and throughout these discussions on whether we are discussing prohibitions relating to the technical characteristics of a weapon system or those relating to how they are used in practice. And the reality is it's been clear that there are concerns around both. And so it's encouraging to see the prohibition referring to both development and use. On paragraph 17A, firstly, we welcome that this formulation emphasises the effects of weapons and not just their designed intent. Secondly, in addition to the word anticipated, we would also use the word predicted. It should be a requirement for autonomous weapon systems to be sufficiently predicted when used. And this requirement for predictability is one that is widely supported in the range of proposals and statements made here. We also agree with many delegations that have recommended a prohibition on systems that cannot be understood, particularly understanding over what conditions will trigger the application of force, and we recommend that this be reflected here. We welcome the use of the word controlled as a requirement, but we really need to refer to the standard of control. We've been using the word meaningful control, and the main issue here is whether or not the control exerted can be meaningful in the circumstances of its use. Ultimately, the human operator should be able to be held morally and legally accountable and responsible for the use of force. The second part of 17A refers to the requirement to comply with IHL. However, as many delegations have pointed out, including the campaign, this requirement for control, predictability and understandability of the use of force also relates to other aspects of international law and ethical principles, and we would strongly encourage this to be reflected in the formulation of the prohibition here. Overall, on 17A, it would not be enough to prohibit systems that are already prohibited. The repetition from some states that existing IHL is sufficient is unhelpful. The key challenge here is that existing law does not currently make explicit the requirements of control, predictability and understandability over autonomous weapon systems, nor the boundaries of these requirements. And so aiming to address this deficit should be the objective of our work. In relation to 17B, we welcome the recognition of the need to attribute responsibility to a human. However, the reference to human command we find problematic. We would prefer reference to the human operator, as this would provide clarity over which human is ultimately responsible for the use of the system. And having that clarity would address or reduce the accountability gap that many have identified as a key concern over the use of autonomous weapon systems. Finally, on paragraph 17, as we raised in our opening statement, We consider the need for prohibitions on systems that would target humans. This is critically important, and we see that these raise acute ethical concerns as well as the serious legal challenges, not least in relation to the risks of bias that are recognized in the paper, and which UNIDIR provided an excellent report and presentation on earlier today. And we see that this is a key element of why we say there should be an outright prohibition on autonomous weapon systems that are designed to target humans. Mr. Chair, on paragraph 18, we consider that many of these requirements should be developed into core legal rules. We are wary of the formulation here that suggests that these matters can be adequately dealt with through national best practices. These issues are at the heart of the matter and should form positive obligations in a legal instrument. But a few specific points on wording. The chapeau here would be better if it emphasized the need to ensure that systems are used in a manner that are sufficiently predictable. In subparagraph A, we would add an explicit obligation on commanders to understand the target profiles the systems use, so as to understand ultimately what's going to trigger a specific application of force by that system. On subparagraph B, this contains important factors by which commanders can limit the function of systems and so make meaningful judgments about their effects. We consider that it should be a legal obligation to have limits on the duration, geographical scope, and scale of system functioning sufficiently for commanders to apply existing rules on the application of force. On paragraph C, this in many ways provides an important basis for paragraphs A and B, and we would suggest bringing it in above those subparagraphs in the text. We think it's important that humans be empowered and informed in the circumstances of the system's use, and that human judgment and control is proximate to the actual application of force. As some others have noted, subparagraph D is perhaps operating at a rather lower level and might be better to be separated out. In relation to E, the issue of automation bias and bias in AI are quite different to each other, and we are wary to suggest that reduction of bias is sufficient. Indeed, we consider, as I said earlier, that preventing effects of bias is one of the key reasons why we say there needs to be an outright prohibition on systems that are designed to target people. Moving on to paragraph 19, and I'm nearly finished, and thank you all for your patience so far. We welcome here the recognition of the need for an operator to make decisions and exert control over the use of force, and for humans to at all times remain accountable. However, we have concerns about the formulation of good faith. We would emphasize the need for judgments to draw on timely information from all sources that are available at the time. And we might suggest that this could be brought in above to paragraph 18, as this provides a principle of human involvement in which the obligations at paragraph 18 can then respond. On paragraph 21, finally, we strongly agree with Chile's proposal to remove the word potential, and we agree that the paragraph does not add value if it is not going to be clearly connected to the requirements under paragraph 17 and 18. Mr. Chair, notwithstanding these specific concerns, we reiterate that we see strong potential in this structure to develop the normative and operational framework towards a legally binding instrument. And as we have said in opening, Mr. Chair, the CCW has already lost serious credibility following the 6th Review Conference, and states that have been claiming that this is the only appropriate forum should perhaps be more concerned about the CCW becoming a failed forum if we cannot produce outcomes from work this year. Mr. Chair, strengthening and adopting this text as a basis for further development is crucial to the work of this group, and we hope that states can find consensus on this proposal and strengthening it by the end of this week. Thank you, Chair.